wife brought her boss to our house, who said he would have fun with her for a few evenings. Hi, Redditors. It's been a roller coaster on my end of life as I have been betrayed and threatened and made to look like a fool for my wife and her boss. You would never believe the audacity of people these days. I've never had to come on here to say my story, and I usually read people's stories on here from time to time and think they're so unbelievable and far-fetched. Heck, I had even been reading one while my wife's boss was screwing her upstairs. I hadn't known the conspiracy that was going on under my roof. My wife was someone I had done everything for, provided for her, cared for her, and this woman decided to make me look like a lesser man. She had plotted with her boss, and if I hadn't been any wiser, I would have fallen for the trap. My wife brought her boss to our home, and he threatened me if I didn't let him sleep with my wife. In essence, he had threatened my wife, but when I was none the wiser, I had taken on every problems of my wife. So when he had threatened, or when she had told me he had threatened her, I had believed. I had believed the lying, twisted witch. Let me narrate what happened. My wife had come home one evening, and immediately she saw me. She had burst into tears, which had been an act, saying that she was in trouble now and didn't know what she was going to do. I had wondered what she was saying, so I had been comforting her and telling her that it was okay, that whatever it was going to get sorted. That had only made her cry more, and I had caved in, and asked her what was wrong. Apparently, she had been involved in some missing money scandal in her workplace, and her boss had found out, and he was going to pin it on her and make her go to jail, except she did as he says. And he wanted to talk to me to explain the situation she was in before he took action. I'm telling you, this had all been staged so perfectly from the beginning, and I didn't know until everything became too suspicious. As a man, I had panicked because I loved my wife and didn't want to see her go to prison, especially as she has blamed me for her stealing the money. I had been in a rough patch where all my investments weren't coming through, and my wife knew, so she had used it to make me dance to her tunes. She had said I wasn't providing for her during that time, and I had made her do it so she could take care of the house. Everything that had spewed out of that woman's mouth had been all lies, and I had believed the witch. I agreed to meet her boss. Fast forward to a late Friday night, my wife's boss followed her back home from work, and the idiot had been all smiles like he was mocking me. I didn't know there were men out there that could be so freaking disrespectful and disgusting, but I had to hold myself from saying anything because I thought my wife was going to go to jail if I said ill against him. I didn't know the weird turn that this dinner conversation was going to take that night, that I would be insulted and belittled by a man in my own home. My wife had ordered takeout as she was coming back from work because she hadn't been in the mood to cook after work. I had accepted that and not complained about it since we had a guest we were trying to pacify. I struck up a small talk conversation with the man, and he had seemed like a very reasonable person from the way he talked. Smart, intriguing. We looked the same age if I wasn't older than him by a year or two. My wife had played the part of a guilt-ridden witch with ease. After dinner, I was getting impatient, so since no one wanted to address the elephant in the room, I decided to address it. I told the boss how my wife was sorry for what had happened and how we would do everything to fix it, which included paying the money she had taken back. Then the first shock of the evening. He said he didn't want the money, that she had committed a crime and had to go to prison for it. In my head, I was like, why this retard in my house then? The second shock came immediately when my wife's boss said he would, however, change his mind if I agreed to what he wanted. If he didn't want money, what else could he want? Then the man opened his mouth and said he wanted to have a few fun evenings with my wife, or he would make sure my wife goes to jail and my reputation suffered for it in the business world. Apparently, he could pull strings to make things hard for me and my company. I didn't even think about how he had gotten information about me or knew about my company, because what I was focused on was the fact that he had just told me that he wanted to sleep with my wife, and he hadn't even looked shameful while saying it. He threatened me in my home that I would face consequences if I didn't let him sleep with my wife. Could you imagine such an audacity? I had grown livid and had ordered him to get out of my house. My wife's boss was like he had just wanted to come and tell me man to man so it wouldn't be like my wife was doing it behind my back. He wanted me to be fully aware of what he was going to do, and he was going to do it in my house, my own house. I know how BS this may sound, and it was a wonder how I didn't punch him from uttering those words out of his mouth. I was trying to be careful so the consequences wouldn't increase on my wife, not knowing that the person I was protecting or trying to protect was a faker. I couldn't call the police on him because he could turn it around and arrest my wife, who had been weeping through the whole talk. I didn't know what evidence he had, or what he held against her. He was just insistent on sleeping with my wife, and he said he would give us the weekend to think about his offer or think about going to jail. My wife whimpered at that. The boss left, and she begged me not to allow her to go to prison, that I should just allow sleep with her boss. that nothing was going to happen, and she asked if I would rather see her in prison than someone sleeping with her. I said I wouldn't choose anyone, that I would fix it, but she went behind my back and brought her boss to my home when I wasn't there. I found out the hard way that I was being played after I saw my wife with her boss on our bed. This was after I told her that I would fix it, and she decided that she and her boss could play me. I made sure they learned the hard way. I bought the company and had them all arrested. You all can refer to me as AJ, my middle name no one knows about. I'm 38 years old, and I've been married to my wife for 6 years with a daughter that's 2 now before she decided to commit this atrocity and put an end to our marriage. I'll call my wife Leah, a fake name because I don't want to give myself away. Leah should be about 29 years old now. If I had been told when I was about to get married that this was how I was going to end up being separated from my wife, I would never have believed. I wasn't a man of conflict. I tried my best to please my wife and provide for her at all costs. I had met her after college at a friend's firm where she had come to apply for a job. Unfortunately for her, my friend's place was overstaffed and he couldn't offer her employment. I had taken her contact and promised to call her once I had found a place for her. I didn't have any space at my firm then because I had just begun the startup and I wasn't heavily hiring. But I had wanted to help because she had seemed sweet and desperate to find a job. About 2 weeks after we had met, I got back to her with bad news that none of the contacts I knew were hiring, and I'm sorry for disappointing her. Leah had been surprised that I had gotten back to her and had thought I had forgotten about looking for a job offer for her. Apparently, she was now working at a Walmart branch store as a sales representative and was going to hold that down until she saw something better. I had agreed to keep in touch with her, but she began chatting me up and asking to know more about me, and I was also interested in knowing her too, as she was very beautiful. We got talking, and I found out that she was an only child with her mom. She had taken out student loans to get through college, and now she needed to pay them back, so that was why she was desperately looking for a job. 2 months later, after a couple of dates and some time spent together, I asked Leah to be my girlfriend because I liked her. We dated for a year plus, and I asked her to be my wife. I got married to Leah in a not-so-extravagant wedding. It had just been her mom and some of her friends from college and me and my parents and some of my friends too. Although the number of my friends at the wedding outweighed hers, it was as if she didn't have any friends or she didn't tell them about the wedding. I hadn't even looked into it then because I thought I loved her. Our wedding went well. We lived happily for at least 4 years. We had our daughter in our 4th year of marriage. I even finally got her the job she wanted, the very one she had used to play me with her boss. I couldn't believe that I had been so stupid to believe she would be a good person till the end. I thought my marriage would be perfect, and I wouldn't be one of the dudes that would come on here to be ranting about his marriage. But here I am. Are there any signs one can use to know if they would end up with a lying and cheating witch? Maybe there's a manual somewhere that can help others, because my wife was literally perfect during our marriage until our 5th year of marriage, once things started getting tough for me. My investments started failing and my company wasn't doing too well in profits. By this time, my wife had just gotten a promotion and literally the whole taking care of our family was on her. And it wasn't as if I left everything on her per se. We had this dinner conversation that she would be pitching in half for our groceries and rent until I was stabilized. You needed to see how she got irritated. She could never hide her expressions very well. Leah started ranting that she had seen it coming when I was investing and buying stocks in businesses that weren't going to reap me any profit, and now I was stuck and I wanted to put it on her. Yep. This was what someone I could literally spend my entire life savings on said to me when I had just mentioned the idea of splitting the bill. This was someone I always bought the trending bags and makeup accessories for, and she couldn't even do this one thing for me. Women, they are the biggest scam ever, I tell you. I started withdrawing slowly from her that day because she could kill me in my sleep if she had the opportunity with the way she had looked at me at dinner that night. You needed to see how my wife's attitude changed from that day. She refused to cook meals again, and she refused to take care of our daughter. She would claim she was busy or tired from work. My home looked a mess, and she didn't even seem to care. She only went to work, ordered takeout as she was coming back home, and went straight to bed after eating. She wouldn't even bother to trash the takeout pack she had eaten, and I was so ready to divorce her at that time, but I wanted her to see what she was going to miss out on. Do you know this woman even started taking trips with her boss without me knowing? I mean, now that I think about it, I should have seen that everything was planned, but how would I have seen that? She had told me that the previous boss got fired, and it was a new one, and I had believed her. When Leah thought I didn't have any more money and was useless to her, this was when she decided to start staying over at work till late and traveling with her boss, the previous one according to her, without my permission. Leah could be gone for 2 days or even 3, and she would say she had a lot to cover at work, and that was why she couldn't come home. A woman who had a 1-year-old child. This went on for over 6 months, and I decided to take matters into my own hands. Luckily, my investment started yielding results little by little, and I decided to give her a little taste of her own medicine. I brought home another woman. Technically, it was my long-distance cousin that I had planned to make my wife jealous. Imagine trying to make my wife jealous instead of divorcing her ass. I just realized how weak and pathetic I was as a man back then as I recall all these things that had gone on in my marriage. Leah started behaving herself immediately when she noticed there was another woman in our home, and all of a sudden I had money. She thought she could come and mark her territory, and I had enjoyed seeing her squirm as she thought I was sleeping with my cousin and spending money on her. Well, I was spending money on her, but I wasn't sleeping with her. I wanted my wife to think that. I recall when my wife had gotten back from work and had met us coming back from a shopping spree. The look on her face had been iconic, and I loved the fact that she was dying with jealousy on the inside. This was the night she had come to confront me about having another woman in the house. That who did I think I was to get another woman while she was still married to me and we hadn't gotten a divorce? Then I said I wanted a divorce, and thank God I had been wise enough to sign a prenup. She had been livid that I wanted to leave her after she had been working her butt off, according to her, to provide for the family. I laid it to her then that I had only asked her to split the bills in half with me because I was experiencing some loss and it wasn't going to be for a long time. She made it look like I had not been doing my job as a husband, and she was the one that had been providing for the family since I married her. I told her she should step up if she didn't want me to divorce her. She cried, and I had been guilt-tripped to forgive her. The trip stopped, and she started trying to fix her lifestyle. I knew she was aware of her actions and wanted to fix it when she apologized for her behavior one night. Leah started fixing meals whenever she got back from work and started taking our daughter to daycare. Of course, I knew it was because of the bags and the lifestyle I was sponsoring for her. I had been a fool in love once, but I wasn't anymore. However, this plan with her boss had taken me by complete surprise, especially as she and I had gone to therapy together to try to work on our marriage. And after concluding our therapy session, she goes ahead and does this. Cheats on me with her boss. She brings him to our home under the guise of stolen money and not wanting to go to prison. She cheated on me right in the open with no shame or remorse or guilt. It was all a game to her, and I was hers to control in her game, but one thing she forgot was that I wasn't stupid. Fast forward to after the dinner when her boss came to my house and told me that he wanted to have a few fun evenings with my wife or else she goes to jail. He had given me a week to think about it, but I decided to act smart. I thought I was doing it for my wife, to keep her from going to prison. After Leah's boss left, Leah became panicky. She told me how no one made her boss wait for anything and how there was nothing I could do to get her out of the mess other than allowing her to sleep with her boss. I had told her she should calm down, that I would sort everything out, but I should have known she wanted it. She wanted to sleep with her boss under my house like some twisted person, and they had come up with the plan. When I told her I was going to handle it, I really was going to handle it. My first step was finding out how high her boss was up in the business world, if he was the only boss or he had a boss. And it turned out he had a boss, and his boss also had a boss. He hadn't made it anywhere up the business ladder, and he thought he could threaten me. And luckily for me, my wife's company was one I had vast shares in. Shares enough to get the next shareholder seat. So I pulled some strings, and with a few calls to friends, I had a decision-making seat in my wife's company, and I was ready to take action against that retard who thought he could come to my house and try to make me look like a fool. At this moment, I hadn't known I was going to get my hand into something deep going on between my wife and her boss. I thought I was just defending my wife from her boss, and my second course of action had been to get him sacked. Once again, I pulled the connection that I had and decided to get even with my wife's boss by getting him fired. I called the top decision makers I knew in the company and asked if it was possible to fire the new guy, my wife's boss. Then that was when I got to know that my wife's boss had been the same person since she had started working for them 2 years ago. So the thing she had told me about them hiring a new boss had been a lie. That was the first lie I unraveled in the maze my wife had so carefully mapped around me. She had lied to me. This meant that the boss that used to carry her out on trips and make her spend after work hours working till late was the same person. And it wasn't as if she was single to begin with. She had been married and the retard had made her stay till late. Only God knows if they were working. I mean, if they could plan to do that whole setup in my house, they hadn't been working together. More like sleeping together for the past 2 years. However, it was just recently I got to know of these things and pieced 2 and 2 together. At the start of my investigation, I was like a fish out of water. I didn't know about the scandal that was brewing in my home between my wife and her boss. When I started making inquiries about the man to get him fired, the people I had called had said they weren't going to be able to do such a thing. Apparently, my wife's boss had hauled in big accounts for them, and they couldn't dispose of him so easily because he hadn't done anything to the company, nor had he violated their rules. Well, of course, I couldn't tell them he was practically harassing my wife and telling her he would put her in jail if I didn't let him sleep with her. So I decided to investigate my wife's boss further. There was no way he didn't have anything he was covering up that I could use against him. He had wanted to pin me down with a threat to my wife, so I was going to find leverage I could use over him. I hired a private investigator to look into my wife's boss, and I started making moves to become the highest shareholder of the company. Till now, I really don't know how everything aligned perfectly for me. It had been such a big leap of faith throwing all my money into my wife's company, but I was a man on a mission. The mission was to get my wife out of the mess she had made. The mess I thought she had made. The mess she had made me believe she had created because I couldn't provide for some few months in our marriage, and now that was my binding contract to get her out of the mess. I made the moves to acquire my wife's company in silence. I made sure no one I had enlisted for help was going to spill. I wanted it to be a surprise by the time the week my wife's boss had given to me as an ultimatum was over. LOL, I didn't even need to have done all that. She had gone against what I had told her. Heck, the man had slept in my house that weekend, and I had been none the wiser trying to find a solution to a non-existent problem. Anyway, I acquired my wife's company in 5 days. I can be a very persuasive man, and that was all it took to convince other low-level shareholders to sell their shares to me in exchange for shares in my main company. I had money and investments everywhere. I hadn't thought about the acquisition of my wife's company very well because I had been desperate for a solution, but it all turned out well. Once I was the person with the highest number of shares, I convinced the owner to sell the company to me. You might be wondering how easily I had done that because I assure you, when I had gone to see the owner of my wife's company, I didn't know it would be so easy for him to sign over the thing to me. But this is all how you position yourself, and how eager you are to achieve your set-out goals. Like I had mentioned earlier, I was a man on a mission. The owner of my wife's company had no children to my luck and was already old and was looking to sell the company. According to him, he had worked all his life and there was a lot to show for it, but no one to hang on to it. He had just wanted to sell off everything he owned and retire to a farm in some forgotten state in the US and live out his remaining days. He was glad it was me he was selling the company to, and he hoped I didn't end up like him, chasing the wrong things that I forget to chase after what was most important. Anyway, that's a story that has nothing to do with the wild goose chase my wife and her boss had started. However, I became the boss of my wife's boss, and that night I had signed the contract of ownership. I had asked for the financial statement of every department in the company. You guys all know the reason I had decided to do all this: to hide my wife's mistakes, to make sure she never had to sleep with her boss. I had pulled strings for this woman. I owed a lot of people personal favors. I'm sure the men here know what it means to owe others favors. I did it for her because somehow I still thought our marriage could work. I mean, I should have ended it a long time ago, right? I had landed myself in her trap. But I got out of it. I got out of it before they could establish their goal. Yes, my wife and her boss. There are so many deep layers to my experience, but I would make you all understand, though. I got the financial statements that I requested for, and this was when I found out that all the accounts were added up, including the one from my wife's department. I hadn't wanted it to look too suspicious, only questioning the accounts from my wife's department, so I asked general questions about all of them, and asked to see the full financial statement for the departments dating back 2 years. I had asked for an overview the first time. On my second ask, I had wanted to view the full paperwork. I got what I had asked for because I was the new boss. I was stressing them out, I knew. Imagine being called for an internal meeting on Zoom call for a handover you had no idea at all was coming, and to give your new boss the financial statements of the company. That was what I was doing with the guys that held executive positions in my wife's company. They were answering me. Anyway, I checked the financial statements of my wife's department for the last 2 years, and it was also clear. In fact, it was too clear. No decimals in place. The figures had been too perfect, like someone had placed those figures. I'm not sure you'll understand this aspect, but let me continue on. The statement looked too perfect over the last 2 years. No carryovers, no additions. The multiplications of the figures were in fives. To the normal human eye, it looked like a perfect financial performance from the department. But to me, who was looking for flaws, I found the flaws just exactly as I had known it would be there. I had pored over those documents through the night and was ready to sack my wife's boss the next morning. I was relishing to see the look on his face when I came with the police to boot him out of the company and threatened his life as he had done to me in my home. I had fantasized about going to meet him privately first, as he had done for me, to tell him of how pride goes before a fall, and then tell him that I know how he had been laundering money off the department he was working under in my company. Then I was going to tell him how I didn't want the money and what I wanted was his ass in prison. I was going to then give him 1 week to squirm and think about his life before the police hauled his ass to prison because I was going to press charges. I was just waiting on my private investigator to get back to me on the dirt he had on my wife's boss. To confirm the retard had been stealing money from the company, how he had been siphoning money and tried to blame my wife for it. My wife, whom I still thought was innocent at this time. Leah had come home from work and was all buzzing with excitement about how her company had been sold to a faceless man in the middle of the night. That the news was all everyone could talk about today, especially how he had asked for the financial statements of all the departments in the company. Leah had been scared that this was how they would catch her slip up and then send her to jail. I assured her that wouldn't happen, but I couldn't tell her that I was the one who had bought the company. I wanted it to be a surprise to her. I wanted to show her how I could make all her worries disappear. That was the plan, but I needed enough evidence to get her boss arrested. The next day, the private investigator that I had hired called for a meeting with me to discuss my findings. I was right. My wife's boss had been involved in siphoning money from the company they worked for. But that wasn't the surprising thing. Do you want to know the surprising thing? There was an online Cayman Island account with huge amounts of money inside in my wife's middle name. At first, when the PI had told me, I had countered it and said it wasn't possible, that it was my wife's boss that had used my wife's name to set her up. Then I got the shocking part of the surprising news. The account was in my wife's name, but it was my signature that had the controlling power. In essence, my wife had lifted up my signature from a document and used it to open up the account, so when push came to shove, she would frame me for the fraud, and I would go to jail for her. That was when I had started piecing two and together. Well, with the help of the pictures the PI had laid in front of me. Pictures of my wife and her boss smiling at each other. My wife's boss had his hands on her waist in one. In another one, he had his tongue shoved down her throat, and in another one, they were laughing at something as they headed into a hotel. My wife was a lying, conniving, cheating woman who didn't care about anyone so long as she was getting what she wanted from you. She hadn't gotten what she wanted from me that time because my investments were tied up and weren't reaping profits, so she had moved to her boss. Lamau. They had planned it all. It clicked in my head as I stared at the pictures in front of me. I looked closely at one of the pictures and saw that the street was recognizable. That had been my house. I asked the PI when he had taken that picture, and he had said it was yesterday. This was when I knew she had gone behind my back to bring her boss into my home. While I was trying to work out a way to stop her from going to jail, this was the payback I got. Leah had thought everything through and through. To her, I was the one going to jail instead. And I had been working my ass off to make sure she never smelt the inside of a prison cell. And this woman was ready to drop me off like a hat. The PI told me it was yesterday he had taken the picture of my wife and her boss just right up my street, so I rushed home. The only thing I could think of was how betrayed I felt. I don't know why I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was a miracle I didn't get into an accident on my way home. I got to my house and rushed up the stairs, and lo and behold, it was my wife and her boss on the bed mid-act. Oh, this time I punched the idiot all right. Then I called the police and the IRS on them. They were both going away for a long time. You needed to see the way my wife's face had changed when she knew she had been caught. Like she went straight into pleading mode, throwing her boss's body off her and begging for forgiveness. But it was way too late. I had given her a second chance, and she had proved to me why I should never have married her in the first place. The police came and took them away. I had followed behind to submit evidence of my claim. My wife's eyes had widened when she had heard me say I was the boss of her company, and so they had committed money siphoning against my company. I pressed charges and wanted to see them in court. After the court proceedings, for which my wife's boss went to jail for 10 years, Leah had gotten out of going to jail. She had taken a plea and an option of fine and had somehow convinced the jury and judge that it was her boss that had led her to do everything. I knew her for the manipulator she was. Once the court was over, I asked her to sign the divorce. She couldn't take me to court because we had signed a prenup. Everyone leaves the marriage as they came. She wanted to fight for custody of our daughter too, but I had dug deep into her past and found out she used to deal drugs in high school. I told her if she wanted to fight over our daughter, I was going to reveal that piece of information in court. Honestly, I hadn't known Leah at all. I can't believe I had married someone that used to deal drugs in high school. Well, my lesson has been learned, and I hope you learn from my experience too. Do a background check on that woman you want to marry. Have her sign a prenup before you get married. And don't be a fool if you give her a second chance. Expect it to happen again. After the court and the divorce was over, I couldn't just let Leah go scot-free after putting my life on a merry-go-round. Set her apartment and This was after I had written a bad review about her online from the company's perspective. No one was going to employ her again. She was going to find it hard to build from scratch in this city again. And yes, it was only her apartment. The fire service came right on time before the fire spread. I'm living my life greatly with my daughter, but it would be very hard for me before I trust another woman that I didn't raise or that didn't give birth to me.